U.S. Democrats are shaking up the way they pick their presidential nominee. South Carolina is replacing Iowa as the first state to vote in the primaries. But will the changes better reflect America's racial diversity? This is Inside Story. Hello, welcome to the program. I'm Adrian Finighan. The Democratic National Committee in the U.S. has approved Joe Biden's push to give black and other minority voters more sway in the presidential nomination process. Voters in all 50 states get to choose between various contenders in the party primaries, a process that takes months. And those who start the race on a winning note tend to gain momentum for their candidacy. For decades, Iowa has been first on the primary calendar, followed by New Hampshire, two of the least diverse states in the nation. They were followed by Nevada and South Carolina. Now, the first Democratic primary will be in South Carolina, where black voters play a significant role. New Hampshire will stay second, along with Nevada, which moves up in the calendar. Georgia and Michigan will follow. All of those, except South Carolina, are battleground or swing states. Michigan and Georgia voted for Donald Trump in 2016 before flipping to Joe Biden in 2020. Let's bring in our guests for today's discussion. From Washington, we're joined by Douglas Sloan, senior political analyst at the National Capital Strategy Group. From Marietta, Georgia, Jason Shepard, attorney and assistant professor of political science at Kennesaw State University. And from London, we're joined by Leslie Vinjamuri, director of the US and the Americas program at Chatham House, an independent policy institute. Welcome to you all. Douglas, let's start with you. Why then did the Democratic National Committee feel that it was so important to upend a century of political tradition and reorder the party's presidential nominating calendar? What difference is it going to make?
Well, this move, which is a very strategic move by the DNC, will allow for greater racial, geographic, and economic diversity in the First in the Nation primary, which is important because the backbone of the Democratic Party voting base is black voters. So this will not only add diversity to the process, but will give black candidates and other minority candidates a much better chance of advancing in the primary process, as opposed to maybe just trying to survive until the South Carolina primary. Now, we all saw the last time we had a black president, Barack Obama, he actually won Iowa. So I'm sure that my Republican counterparts are going to be quick, excuse me, to point that out. However, every black or minority candidate in the process thus far has simply not fared as well as Barack Obama. And this is important for increasing the diversity in the process. It is important for black voters, which are the base of the Democratic Party. So I feel that this is a great move by the DNC.
Jason, reordering the DNC's primary calendar unlinks the Democrats from Republicans, which have held almost identical lineups since, 2008? How will Republicans respond?
Well, likely in a lot of these states, especially you look at Georgia and South Carolina, which are Republican-controlled states, you do need the General Assembly of those states and the governor to sign legislation to move the primaries. The other side of that is the Republican National Committee does have still those penalties for moving the primaries, unless the Republican National Committee goes along with the Democrats, which I don't think they will. I think we're going to stick with Iowa and New Hampshire as the first two, as it historically have been, for a number of reasons. And the main one being you can really run grassroots campaigns in those states. You don't need a lot of money from the start, and you can actually build up some momentum and start attracting donors by the time you get to states with more expensive media markets like South Carolina, like Nevada. But you can do grassroots campaigning in Iowa and New Hampshire to build that momentum. In fact, it was in the mid-1970s when the little-known Georgia governor, a Democrat named Jimmy Carter, basically moved to Iowa and started crisscrossing the state for over a year, and won that caucus to propel him to eventually be the nominee for the Democrat Party. And as Douglas pointed out, Barack Obama also won the Iowa caucuses as well. So it enables a candidate that doesn't have a lot of backing behind them. And as I said, it's going to be a hard move for states that already have their primary set, that don't want to be penalized by the Republican National Committee for moving their primaries ahead of Iowa or New Hampshire, or really even changing the political landscape in that, to really decide that they have to do what the Democrats want. Secondly, the other alternative is to do the Democrat primary on one day and the Republican primary on another. And that gets very expensive to especially Georgia taxpayers, but taxpayers across the country, to run two statewide elections. I think this is really going to be a non-starter unless there's a lot of cooperation. I think you heard that out of the meeting yesterday at the DNC, talking about some of the waivers that they were putting in, knowing that a number of these states were not going to go along with this new scheme of a primary calendar.
Let's put that to Leslie. Then, Leslie, will the two parties cooperate at a state level? Is this going to happen, or can states ignore what the DNC says?
Well, I think it's going to be very politicized. These are not two parties that have been getting along in recent history, so it's inevitably going to be a very challenging set of negotiations. But this is a party and a president who are determined to really drive change across the United States. And that I don't think we can underestimate the symbolism of saying that while Iowa matters, I say this as somebody who hails from Nebraska, right next to Iowa. This is a small state that's had an outsized influence on the early dynamics in the electoral process, long recognized as such. So the president is putting his stamp on democracy in America and saying we're diverse, and we need to give momentum to a fundamentally different set of actors. Now, it's politically, there's a risk involved in this too, of course, which is we know the Republican Party has spoken very effectively to white American voters, low and middle income. And that's a segment that the Democrats want to hold on to, working class Americans. So I think there's a signal that's potentially set. But, not only moving that primary up front to South Carolina, but also building enthusiasm amongst African American voters to turn out not only in South Carolina, but in many other states, I think is something that's clearly part of the inspiration and the motivation behind this.
Leslie, you say we've got a president and a party that wants to drive change. Let's put something to bed straight away here. Is there any political chicanery at play here? Does doing this benefit President Biden in any way in terms of his re-election?
The reality is that if President Biden decides to run, which seems entirely plausible and more likely than not, he's not going to be competing in the primary season. It's very unlikely that he's going to have a serious contender. So in this round, this is a president who, if he chooses to run, is going to get his party's nomination, absent something very unexpected, which I don't think many people can anticipate what that would be. But it sets an agenda not only for this electoral for the 2024, but for years going forward. Iowa's had that spot for a very, very long time. These things don't tend to change quickly. So it's a very consequential choice going forward.
Douglas, why elevate South Carolina to first place on the nominating calendar? It hasn't backed a Democrat in a presidential race since 1976. Why on earth should the party concentrate so many early primary resources there?
Well, this is about the primary as opposed to the general election, and it's about expanding the number of voices in that critical early window in the election process. So it's not so much about South Carolina. We know South Carolina is a red state, and we know that it goes Republican. I think, like you said, since it hasn't gone, it's been consistent since the 70s. However, this is about the primary process. This is about elevating diverse communities in that early primary window, which is at the core of the Democratic Party. So it is important, it is critical that we make the the DNC makes the primary process more diverse. And bringing South Carolina in as the first in the nation primary ensures that will happen and ensures that Black and other minority candidates have a place at the table early on in the process, and are not completely wiped out in majority white states like Iowa or New Hampshire, that they're actually able to move forward and advance throughout the primary process. And we just saw Joe Biden do poorly in Iowa, poorly in New Hampshire, and then come back and run the tables after South Carolina. So obviously, South Carolina is a very important key or cog in that wheel as far as as far as Democratic parties are concerned at this day and age. And so it's important that we give them their due. And I think it's a good idea to elevate them to this point.
So, Douglas, you're satisfied that the Democratic National Committee's decision to reorder the party's presidential nominating calendar benefits voters most? This is being done for the benefit of the electorate and not the politicians.
I say that it's being done the importance is for the benefit of the voters, minority voters in the primary process, in the primary part of the process. So this will help elevate the voices at the table in the primary part of the process. It will give voters more representation at that stage in our electoral process. So yes, it benefits the candidates, but it also benefits the voters that they represent. And that was something that was being left out in Iowa, because Iowa is lily white, has been lily white for decades, since time immemorial now. So being that Black voters are at the core of the Democratic Party, the base of the Democratic Party, Black women in particular, and that the Democrats haven't won the White House without a Black person on the ticket in over 27 years, since Bill Clinton in 1996. It's important that the Democratic Party recognize the importance of having diverse communities, recognize the importance of their base and Black voters, and make an effort to give Black voters in diverse communities their seat and their voice at the table.
Jason, the Democratic Party chair in Iowa, Rita Hart, says that the party the committee rather, has turned its back on Iowa and rural America. Do you agree with that?
Oh, I agree absolutely with that. I mean, as I said before, the way the primary system is situated right now, it's easier for someone without that backing of big money to go in and get a grassroots campaign. Plus, people in Iowa and New Hampshire are used to getting to know presidential candidates personally. They stop in the diners, they stop in the shops. In 2000, when I was with the Bush primary campaign in New Hampshire, we went to bowling alleys. So it's really that retail grassroots politics where candidates are able to hone their message. And the Democrat Party is really cementing itself as a party of the East Coast and West Coast elite. And by this move, they're basically showing we're forgetting about flyover country. We're forgetting about those voters in Iowa. It's one thing to sit there and say you want more diversity, but the president of the United States needs to be able to speak to all Americans, regardless of their race, ethnicity, religion, creed, or national origin. And by concentrating on South Carolina, which was always at least if not the third, but maybe the fourth primary. And like I said, like Douglas said, President Joe Biden was able to win the South Carolina after losing New Hampshire and Iowa. However, once again, by even placing well in those that caucus in that primary state, candidates are able to get momentum. And we did see in 2008, eventual presidential nominee Barack Obama beat Hillary Clinton in Iowa, because Barack Obama represented a state that had a large metropolitan area, Chicago, but was also a very rural, very agriculture-centric state. And Barack Obama knew how to speak to all Americans, and from having to do that as senator of Illinois. And I think the Democrats are setting themselves up to have candidates that are really just focused on the far wings of the party, on the liberal elites, on the big money elites who fund these campaigns, because the nominee will need that funding early. And if they don't end up with that funding, then maybe the Democrats will kind of regret their tactic in doing this by having primary campaigns that lead to the national convention where you have fights on the floor because there is too many candidates and none of them were able to sort of stand above the rest and get that nomination early. You know, you typically don't want a floor fight at a convention today's day and age. And the Democrats will make it a lot harder for them to win in November if they're still fighting in August and September.
All right, I want to put that point to Leslie in just a moment about candidates and what it will mean for them. But first, let me just throw this back to Douglas. Douglas, the Democrats are a party of East Coast and West Coast big money elites. What do you say to that?
I've never heard anyone describe South Carolina as being part of the East Coast elite. South Carolina is majority white. It has a lot of rural areas down in South Carolina. And to say that, oh, that moves it away from middle America when you're talking about a place that's down south and has so much rural land and farmland, it doesn't make any sense. Of course, that's not the case. Of course, Democrats are going to still try to reach out to everyone in the United States, Black, white, Asian, Hispanic, gay, straight. We are the true big tent party in that regard. We are not trying to exclude anyone. And again, this is all about elevating diverse communities and expanding the early window to give more people a seat at the table. Often, and we keep coming back to Barack Obama, and I said it early before, Barack Obama did win in Iowa. However, I think that we need to understand that Barack Obama, to a great extent, was an anomaly. We may never see someone like Barack Obama in modern politics again, at least not in our lifetime. So a lot of other Black and minority candidates don't even manage to make it to South Carolina. They've run out of money by that time. Cory Booker had run out of money. Kamala Harris, again, she actually entered her candidacy even before the primaries got started. So it's important to at least allow minority candidates to have a seat at the table and have a level playing field out of the gates. So South Carolina gives the Democratic Party and gives Democratic candidates a chance to do that. Again, we want to elevate diverse communities here. We're trying to reach out to all Americans. And no, South Carolina definitely isn't part. If anyone has ever been to South Carolina, I can tell you that is not a part of the East Coast elite.
Leslie, you hinted a few minutes ago about potential, I suppose, mild danger for President Biden here in terms of his re-election. I mean, he's expected to run without a major primary challenge. But could another candidate gain traction if they choose to run against him, especially if New Hampshire, for instance, ignores the DNC and goes first and fields its own candidate? I mean, could it upend the way that the presidential race could run it, in that it could throw up a maverick or an anomaly, like as Douglas describes him, like Barack Obama?
I think it's extremely unlikely in this race. If President Biden chooses to run again, it seems again extremely likely that he will. If he continues that, he's going to get that nomination. It's very different from Hillary Clinton, Barack Obama a moment, because in that race, neither one of them were already the president. They didn't have a number of policies that they can claim and are widely seen as a success within their own party. It's a very different scenario. But I think the other thing that we're maybe not focusing on is that this changes a number of things, right? It puts South Carolina first, but then it also puts a number of races potentially ahead of Iowa, and some really key races for the Democrats, some really key states for the Democrats. So Nevada, Georgia. And then by the time you get to Iowa, it looks like Michigan will be the same at the same moment. And these are states that it's very important for the Democrats to see if they can field a candidate. How does that candidate do in these very critical states? Some of them are swing states. So it gives a very early reading of the likely success of any given candidate. And again, it helps to drive turnout in states that are really critical when you get to a general election. So I think that undoubtedly the strategists behind this thinking are not only thinking about South Carolina, they're thinking about the entire sequence of events, which states are going to matter in that final real runoff. And that's got to be part of the calculation. There is, to speak to this question about Iowa, about white working class Americans, it is a real problem, obviously, as we know from the last 6 years for the Democrats. And that, I think, is something that is a problem not only in Iowa, it's a problem in many of those states that are now going to have primaries before Iowa. And in many of those states, those are the states where that vote really matters when you get to the actual runoff. So I think this is not only a vote, a sequencing that's intended to get more voters out to really recognize the diversity of the United States, but it's also a savvy political move to try and test candidates within the party and see who's likely to succeed.
Leslie, what sanctions could the DNC levy against a state like New Hampshire if it insists on going first, or Iowa with its caucuses?
I think it's uncharted ground, and I think the party isn't going to want to use formal sanctions. It's going to want to negotiate these things, talk about these things, get the party together and aligned and on the same page and to a consensus, and broker some deals quietly and privately. The Democratic Party doesn't do anything for the success of its own future by looking divided and using formal sanctions. So I would suspect that wouldn't be the way that they will look to move forward on this issue.
Jason, will all this be ironed out, do you think, in time for the 2024 contest? Will it have to wait until 2028? What does all of this mean for the potent political polarization we've seen in recent years in the US? You've got these two now. If this goes ahead, two intra-party competitions for totally different visions of America.
I think it's probably going to have to wait till 2028 for this. In Georgia, the General Assembly only meets for 40 legislative days once a year. They're meeting right now. So I don't see this being on anyone's real radar as a priority to change our primary date for 2024. So it would have to probably be 2028. And once again, we're looking at the sanctions and whether the Democrat Party opposes them on the states that do, if Iowa or New Hampshire choose to ignore this and go early. I have seen in the Republican side where states have changed their primaries that the Republican National Committee has cut the delegation in half of those states. So there are penalties, and it's usually on those grassroots voters. And I just don't know that Republican states like New Hampshire, with their control by a Republican governor, Republican General Assembly, Georgia as well, are really going to go with this new election schedule. Americans, especially those in New Hampshire and Iowa, are very proud of the fact that they are small states that are normally overlooked by presidential candidates, and really the only time that they actually have an opportunity to play a strong part in the process is the fact that they are the first caucus and the first primary. And part of it being the first means that the candidates spend a lot more time there too, because once you really get into the primary and caucus season, where you have elections in states going back to back, especially if you have a Super Tuesday like we've had in so many elections where you have a number of states in the South going at once, you really can't do that retail politics. Yep. And it's kind of ironic that I talk about East and West Coast elites and the two candidates that Douglas brings up, one from New Jersey and one from California. So that's what we're talking about. We're talking about those candidates that really can get the financial backing of the liberal and progressive mega donors to get out of the gate. And you won't see a situation where a candidate can kind of try limping through New Hampshire and Iowa and eventually get into South Carolina. If we have these big states first, and South Carolina is not that big, but it's bigger than New Hampshire, Iowa, it's going to be a lot harder for sort of the self-starter candidates. For Cory Booker, senator from New Jersey, who may not have that early financial backing to get head of steam where he may have in those other states.
Sorry to interrupt you. We have a couple of minutes left. I just want to get a word in from Douglas and from Leslie again. Is this going to have to wait until 2028, Douglas?
I am inclined to agree with my the Republican colleague there.
That's great.
Yeah, it will.
Something we agree on.
It will likely have to wait until 2028 for everything to get sorted out. This can be a complicated process, but I believe it is something that will happen.
Okay, Leslie, final view from you then. It's too complicated right now, isn't it? I mean, nobody's in agreement here. The Democratic National Committee. We can't just say, right, we're going to do this and then expect everyone to jump, especially as we heard, where some states are controlled, the legislatures and even the governor's house, governor is controlled by the Republicans.
I think when politics move, they sometimes move very slowly and sometimes they move very, very fast. And part of that's down to events and determination and backdoor deals. So I wouldn't bet against this. But I do think that the fact that the conversation has been put on the front pages of our conversation across the U.S. is very significant. This is a president and a party who are determined and very committed to recognizing that America is a different country than it was when the current sequence of primaries was established.
Okay. There we are going to have to end it for today. Many thanks indeed to you, Douglas Sloan, Jason Shepherd, and Leslie Vinjamuri. And as always, thank you for watching. Don't forget you can see the program again at any time by going to the website, which you'll find at aljazeera.com. For further discussion, join us on our Facebook page. You'll find that at facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. And you can join the conversation on Twitter. Our handle at AJ Inside Story. From me, Adrian Finighan, and the team here in Doha, thanks for being with us. Bye for now.